big welcome to everybody to this Doubling Nature event. My name is Richard Astle. I'm the chairman of Natural Cambridgeshire, and it's a huge pleasure to have so many of you join us today. What I think is a really important day. It's a day when we're launching our plans for how we deliver the Doubling Nature ambition we launched last year. Just very quickly on technology, if I may. We're going to be having about 150 people joining this Zoom call. So we are keeping participants on mute and without their video, just to sort of allow us to focus on the speakers. And we will be asking you all, when we get to question and answers, to do that through the chat function only. We simply can't scroll through that many screens to see who's got their hands raised, or for that matter, to allow people just to sort of shout out. So forgive us for that. That's the technology as a slight barrier. But it's also, of course, a great enabler to have so many people here who aren't having to travel to join us. So you're all very welcome. We've got a busy agenda. I'm sure you've all hopefully had copies of that, and some tremendous speakers to talk to us today and to give us some thoughts about how we can drive this ambition forward. But I'm just going to kick off with an overview myself of where Natural Cambridgeshire is, what we're trying to do, and how we can all work together. I think nature matters fundamentally, existentially. It is not some nice to have. I mean, if nature is dying around us, we should be worried, very worried. And it is, and we must be worried. I honestly can't bring myself to watch Sir David Attenborough's Extinction, the Facts. Everyone tells me I should. I would actually find it unbearable to have to witness yet again the continued mass destruction of our natural world. Coming close on the report from the World Wild Fund for Nature of the 68% drop in animal numbers. That's the total number of animals living on our planet since 1970. So David's film is, of course, a vivid reminder of the crisis we face. For if nature dies, then we lose, and our well-being is at extreme risk, not only because of the impacts on our economy, on our society, our health, on air and water quality, but we also lose much beauty and we lose great joy. And that really is pretty fundamental. And this problem isn't happening just in the Arctic Circle or the rainforests or the coral reefs. Rather, as I say, it isn't just happening there, it's happening here, right here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, where once common species of wildlife are disappearing, hares, hedgehogs, butterflies, bees, all in steep and continual decline, and where our chalk streams are drying up, and where, as a county, we can take no pride in having the lowest percentage of any county of woodlands and good quality wildflower meadows. A couple of examples to help that resonate. Just think what is going to happen and how we're going to feel when we lose our ash trees. Picture your landscape without them. Or when we lose the last turtle doves, that quintessential sound of the summer. Swifts over our villages, or can no longer hear nightingales in our county. So we really do have to act. We've known that for quite some time, I'm afraid, and we have to act right now. There is no alternative, I believe. If we do act, then we have an opportunity. And far from being daunted by the facts of extinction, the partners in Natural Cambridgeshire are spurred on by them, because we know that we all of us, every individual, have it in our gift to change that trend, at least locally. So today's meeting is deliberately, relentlessly optimistic. Last year, we outlined an ambition to double nature across Peterborough and Cambridgeshire. This year, today, we are outlining 4 key actions that we believe can make that happen, and quickly. And let's be very ambitious, please. We talk a lot about the economic growth of the county. We take pride in the economic miracle that is Cambridge, and Peterborough as one of the fastest growing cities in the country. We rightly laud the jobs we will create, the houses we will build. But we don't talk nearly enough about the nature we will and must restore, the wonderful landscapes that can be created, recreated, and the vastly improved health and well-being of our people, if we put nature at the heart of what we do. So why don't we, as a county, Peterborough and Cambridgeshire, aspire to have the fastest rate of nature recovery? Wouldn't that be something wonderful, not only to aim for, but to achieve? Today we will hear from several keynote speakers, all of whom believe in that message and have ideas and thoughts as to how we can achieve it. And today we're also launching 4 key initiatives that we believe can actively take forward the doubling nature ambition. Hopefully you will all have received in advance copies of some of these documents. If you haven't, that's probably because we needed people to register, so we had their email addresses so we could send things out to. If you haven't, they're all on the Natural Cambridgeshire website. So 4 key initiatives. First of all, a landscape-led approach that will put Peterborough and Cambridgeshire firmly on the map of nature recovery as it thrives across the county. Natural Cambridgeshire's partners have identified 5 key landscapes with the potential to deliver significant benefits for nature and enhanced access to green open space for residents and visitors alike. And those are all detailed in the document that you see. And they've been chosen, those landscapes, because they're the areas where we believe there are the most opportunities to help nature recover. Back to that in a minute. So there's a kind of top level approach, the landscape-led approach, but there's also the community approach. And we've developed a toolkit of small steps that each community can make to double nature close to home. And this really is about the practical delivery of nature recovery at the community level. And it can be very simple, very practical, very achievable. For example, if every parish in the county planted 10 trees a year for 10 years, then we'd have nearly 30,000 more trees across our landscape. Already we have launched this toolkit to parishes in the countryside west of Peterborough with excellent results, not only for nature, but also for people. And we'll be talking to Susie Lucas from Bainton and Ashton Parish later, chairman of that parish, about the experience and why that parish is involved. And then the third thing we're launching today is a Doubling Nature Pledge, through which individuals, businesses and other organisations can play their part in the ambition. So this really is something that everybody can get involved in, whether it's planting more pollinating plants in gardens, or if you live in an apartment, putting another pot of lavender out on your balcony. Whatever it is, you can play your part. Greening up workplace car parks, whatever it might be, there is something that everybody can do. And fourthly, we will also be announcing ideas for a Doubling Nature investment fund that will provide the resources to make this happen. I'm delighted that Adrian Cannard from the Combined Authority will be talking more about this in detail. Just to touch back on those 5 landscapes that we've identified. On Clare Countryside, the Nene Valley, the Great Ouse Valley, the Connected Fens and the Gog Hills around Cambridge. We've identified them because that's where we think there is the potential to help nature recover most quickly. They're the areas where there are already large nature reserves which can be expanded and linked together, and where there is the potential for new habitat creation, as well as, very importantly, for people to visit and enjoy and engage with nature. These are the areas where we want to work very closely with landowners and farmers to develop new ideas, working within the emerging framework of the new agricultural subsidy regime and, for instance, the new biodiversity offsetting regime. I should stress that these are not new designations. They're not part of any local plan process. They're not statutory. So landowners need not fear that there's some new obligation involved in all of this. Rather, these are the areas that we, Natural Cambridge, and our partners include many landowners, want to prioritise because of their potential. Farmers and landowners are crucial to the delivery of this. There are so many farmers, again, many of them on this call, already pursuing wonderful nature-friendly farming and showing the way. And so some of what they're doing is quite astonishing. And there are others that we need to bring with us on this journey so that their farms can prosper in the new world of changing climates, depleting soils, and nature recovery. So finally, before our first speaker, just a word on Natural Cambridgeshire itself. We are the local nature partnership, and we're hoping soon to complete our transformation into a charity with a new board of trustees. The initial board of trustees will be drawn from the existing members of the current partnership, all of whom will be in place for the first year before, if they wish, offering themselves for re-election. There are also 4 trusteeships that will be elected and nominated by our wider partnership forum, and that is open to all organisations who tangibly and demonstrably support our ambitions. So again, check the website and do get involved. Once we become a charity, we can actually start to build some capacity to help us accelerate our ambition. I think it might just be worth making sure everybody is aware that at present Natural Cambridgeshire has no staff and virtually no money. Thanks to the support of our key partners, this year we expect to have an income of around £20,000. That would be £15,000 more than last year. But please do bear with us, our resources are very stretched. I think that's a rather shameful indictment of where resource allocation goes in this country, but it is the truth. And we do rely on the voluntary efforts of our individuals and partners. So please do bear with us if we are tardy sometimes responding to your emails, or if we make mistakes in the documents, and some of those have already been pointed out. We're sorry, we'll put them right, and we'll keep moving because our ambition is so important. Could I also take the opportunity to thank all of those on the current partnership executive for their passion, efforts, and sheer hard work. And of course, our funding partners to date, Neam Park Trust, O&H Hampton Urban and Civic, the RSPB, the National Trust, and our local authority partners at the County, East and South Cambs District Councils, who've all offered us support. Thank you. And thank you too to the key individuals who've made all this come about today through their tireless efforts, in particular Roger Mitchell, Chris Bowden, Richard Kay, Julia Beeden, and perhaps today is a time to give a special thank you to Phil Clark, who's been our coordinator since the start of the Local Nature Park back in 2011, I think. Thank you, Phil. And finally, thank you to the team at PECT who've organised this event and pulled together the key documents. Finally, please do pass on our thanks to your team. So we have big ambitions. We hope you'll support them. And more than that, I hope you'll all be ready to do your bit as an individual, as a community, as a charity leader, as a politician. Thank you very much indeed for listening to me. Let me then introduce our first speaker. It's a great pleasure to have Dame Fiona Reynolds with us. Dame Fiona is Master of Emmanuel College, Cambridge. She's been Master there since 2012. And before that, of course, I'm sure you'll all be aware, she was the Director General of the National Trust from 2001 to 2012. And I know Dame Fiona is a keen supporter of our agenda, both here locally and across the wider country and indeed internationally. And it's a great pleasure to have you with us here today, Dame Fiona, and to be able to hear from you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Richard, and I would like to put on record my admiration for your vision and your leadership, and to join you in thanking everyone who's pulled this event together. This is so important and timely. Now, Richard, I did watch the documentary on Sunday night. Actually, I was waiting and hoping for that plastic moment that happened, which I'm sure we all remember on Blue Planet. And it was a brilliant and indeed terrifying documentary. But that moment didn't happen. At least it didn't happen for me. So why not, I was asking myself. And I think the answer is clear, is because nature is far more complex and subtle a challenge than plastics. And frankly, a far bigger one. To my horror, I've just passed my 40-year anniversary of working in the conservation movement in one guise or other. And whether that was with my jobs with national parks or CPRE or indeed the National Trust, I realised that throughout that time, I and everyone around has been watching, whether we knew it or not, the insidious loss of nature. Not necessarily catastrophic, but inexorable and stealthy. And so when I think back to remembering clouds of butterflies as a child, to being excited about seeing a handful on the lavender in my garden at home, from the windscreen smeared with moths to its almost clean counterpart today, and from hearing masses of cuckoos every spring to being thrilled about hearing just one this spring, this glorious spring that we had indeed. And so we've become used to seeing and hearing less nature around us, becoming accepting of rarity where once there was plenty. So although we know in our brains that there is a nature crisis, as a society, we haven't really woken up to it yet, not even to the extent that we've woken up to the climate crisis. Now on climate, and you're going to hear more about this afternoon, we now have a clear commitment to carbon net zero by 2050, and that has begun to galvanise key players, whether that's government departments, businesses, public and third sector bodies, into drawing up real and tangible plans. Of course, you know, Brexit and COVID-19 have been quite challenging distractions, but nevertheless, the plans are there. We aren't yet at that point with nature. But as the Descriptor review, some of you will know Professor Partha Descriptor, who's at our university, on the economics of biodiversity, his review will make clear this crisis, the nature crisis, is even bigger than the climate crisis. Now, I am a member of his advisory panel, so I want to just talk to you a little bit about what's been going on in this review. What's very clear to us is that the climate crisis actually lies within the nature crisis, because the nature crisis is about the health of our whole planet. The prospects indeed for the very future of humanity lie within our capacity to restore the health of our whole planet. Yet we're treating our whole planet with what can only be described as disdain. Now, I'm not going to repeat all the figures about extinctions, the unsustainable use of natural resources, or even the decline of biodiversity at local, national and international levels. We kind of know them. What I am going to do is just briefly describe some of the key findings of the Descriptor review, which I think will throw a fresh light on the challenge and what we need to do about it. First thing, and we know this, don't we, that nature has a remarkable ability to regenerate in the face of exploitation and management by humans. But it's quite clear we overshot its ability to do so in about 1950. And so we've now reached a series of dangerous tipping points. Our current pattern of living requires 1.7 Earths globally, more in the Western world. And so our government's commitment to reverse the decline of nature is really welcome, but it's not just about reversing the decline. The challenge is to get back to some kind of equilibrium where regenerative capacity is as big as exploitation, and that is a huge challenge. Second, we have somehow viewed ourselves as operating independently of nature, treating it as an uncosted, perpetually available resource. Until we change this view, we'll fail to understand the fundamental interdependence between human activity and nature and continue to put nature in jeopardy. And third, deriving from this, it's clear that we're measuring our sense of human progress by the wrong indices. Specifically, I'm talking here about GDP, which fails utterly to recognize the impact of our activity on the resources on which we depend. GDP only measures income and expenditure. It has no balance sheet. So as long as we focus on GDP, we're walking into our own extinction. We need new measures by which to judge progress and new ambitions, which the Descriptor review describes as inclusive wealth. Now, the report will come out soon and you'll see it, but in essence, inclusive wealth includes a commitment to both measure and restore the balance sheet of nature, a more equitable distribution of resources, restraint on consumption, and commitment to circular economy. Now, those are all very big and ambitious tasks, but they're absolutely essential. So, lecture over. What now is the challenge that we can do something about? And what in particular does this mean for Cambridge and Cambridgeshire? Now, sadly, of course, we all know that we're starting from a low base because Cambridgeshire is less rich in and has lost more nature than many parts of the country. And anyone who heard Tony Juniper on the radio this morning will have heard that the UK has seen a greater depletion of nature than many other countries. So if Cambridgeshire within that, this is a reminder of our parlous state. Some of the particular resources that are important here are also very vulnerable, particularly lowland peat, which has been badly degraded. Water resources are under serious pressure. And as we know, we experience in Cambridgeshire some of the most intense development pressures anywhere in this country. And moreover, that many people do not have ready access to nature and green spaces. And if there's one thing that we have seen throughout the COVID crisis, it has been how much people need access to nature and green spaces. That's been a crucial part of our human experience in the last 6 months. But happily, there are many people, and many of them are here today, who are now working on solutions. So the vision to double nature is brilliantly clear, brilliantly pithy. My only question, given what I've said, frankly, is whether it's enough. Now, my view is we have to think big and we have to think small at the same time. We have to have a compelling vision for the whole county that will address these big challenges that the Descriptor Review has thrown up. At the same time, and Richard, you've already said this, really, engaging every single person and every single acre of land in practical action to do something about it. So I want very briefly to mention two projects with which I'm involved personally. There are many others, of course, but these are two which I'm involved with and proud to be involved with, which to me combine this task of thinking big and thinking small. Other people here can speak more authoritatively than me if you have questions, but I want to underline their significance. So first is the Fens Biosphere project, which aims to restore the fen landscape to a sustainably operating ecological system. It's a project which is as much about people as it is about nature, which I think is incredibly important, recognising the way that humanity has shaped the fens for millennia, and anyone who hasn't read Francis Pryor's book on the fens should do so. It's remarkable. And it's a project which combines a big vision with microscopic understanding of the way in which a regenerative system of managing the landscape throughout the fens could operate healthily for people and nature in that wide landscape. The second, and Richard, you've already talked about this, is the Cambridge Nature Network, which many people here are involved with, which aims to operationalise, it's a horrid word, but it's what it's doing, that doubling nature vision within 10 kilometres of Cambridge City. So it starts with that big vision, but quickly doubles down to look at the actual situation on the ground, including who owns the land, to work out a pragmatic strategy for nature recovery, for connecting nature elements in the landscape and green space provision. As you've heard, it's identified the key landscape types which are distinctive in this area as the basis for this work. And soon we'll begin talking to landowners and farmers and indeed many others about how they can play their part in that ambitious nature recovery plan. Now, both these projects focus on real people, real places, and have a real chance of making a difference. And that's what we need a lot more of. But we need to make progress at an even more fundamental level too, because ultimately, if we're to meet the challenge as posed by a descriptor, it's a much more profound challenge and responsibility. At present, I think we're too reliant on spatially confined measures, even if they're big, like the Great Fen Project or Wicken Fen, or even Trumpington Meadows, which is big in traditional terms, or whether it's small, as in very local action, or indeed protecting the existing surviving nature reserves and other special places. But our approach has been based for the last few decades on boundaries, on protecting, putting our arms around places with boundaries. Now is the time we need to move beyond boundaries and edges to landscape scale solutions. And in a county like Cambridgeshire, where the development pressures are so intense, we've often found ourselves focusing on how and where we'll grow, rather than how and where we will restore nature and sustainable land management. And I worry still, and I've talked with Stephen Kelly about this, that many rural areas in our planning system are simply just the white bits on the map, rather than being positively identified for the place that they could play in creative nature recovery, landscape protection, and sustainable management, including sustainable farming. I'm a sharer, not a sparer, for those of you who understand that word. And I think it's absolutely vital that we involve food production, sustainable food production, in this vision. But frankly, we need a new development model that starts further back than we often do. So in future, before we make irreversible decisions about where new development should go, we must identify how we're going to achieve sustainable land use, sustainable living patterns, and sustainable ecosystems. In other words, we should start with the land and landscape and the land and the nature that we have or should have in this county. and build places where we need to that are good and sustainable places to live in, not housing estates just put down anywhere. And as an aside, I should say that, frankly, I'm personally pretty horrified by the proposed effective zoning proposals, which are in the government's consultation paper on planning for the future, which in my view would take us further from this goal, but probably enough on that for now. So, the nature crisis is on our watch. We have to do something about it, and we are. I think the challenge is whether we can do more. So my closing thoughts and questions are these. Can we have a vision for nature to matter as much as the economy? Can we have a plan for nature recovery across the whole county? Can we have a plan to ensure everyone has ready access to nature and green space? Can we redirect public resources, whether they're farm subsidies or health investment, into nature recovery and human well-being? Can we incentivise business and new development to pay for nature recovery, not as compensation, but as an integral part of their plans for the future? And can we ensure that all of this is integrated with plans for net zero carbon and resource management? The answer, yes, we can. And if COVID-19 has taught us anything, as I've already said, it is that people need nature. Now let us show that nature needs people and can rely on people to restore our planet's health and well-being, as well as looking after our own health and well-being. So that plastic moment, which we all remember so well, may be a harder thing to create for nature, but it's mission critical. Let's all put our shoulders to the wheel to do it. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Dame Fiona. Sorry, it just takes a while with the technology to come off mute and all that, but thank you so much. And I'd really like to make sure we pick up that list of questions so that we can have a look at them and see how, you know, we can address them, because to me they're questions that we have to answer. You know, this is fundamental. Our agenda isn't sort of, as I said at the beginning, it's not a nice to have, it's existential. And we need to answer those questions. We need to recalibrate. We can, they're not insurmountable. And I do think that one of the things you touched on there is absolutely right, that so many people have reconnected with nature during lockdown, and so many people found nature their solace during lockdown, and that you know, there's one walk a day. And of course, so many people didn't have that opportunity as well, because access to nature is just as important in all of this. So it's really good to hear that the challenge from you, but also that sense of positivity. Thank you very much for joining us today and being part of this, and we look forward very much to working with you. You just said yes indeed to the biosphere. You know, Natural Cambridgeshire has long thought that a biosphere is a very good way forward for the Fens and Fenland. We need to engage very clearly though with the politicians and make sure that fits together seamlessly with all of their plans, and can be seen as something that Cambridgeshire can shout about and really be very proud of. Thank you again for that. If I may, I'm going to turn to our next speaker, and I'll just have to make sure I've got my next speaker lined up and my agenda is right. Yes, it is. And our next speaker is Councillor Bridget Smith. Councillor, welcome. Councillor Smith has been a district councillor in South Cambridgeshire since 2008, I believe, and became leader of the council in 2017. Throughout her career, she's had a passion for the environment and a track record of delivering environmental issues. She's also a board member of the Combined Authority, and pertinently for what we've asked her to speak about now, she is the political lead for the environment in the Oxford-Cambridgeshire ARC plans. Councillor Smith, we're very, very pleased to have you with us. Thank you for your time. Look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Right, I can't see myself on the screen. Does that mean other people can, or?
No, we'll just sort that out for you.
Sort that, okay.
You want to carry on, Councillor, and we'll just sort out.
That's fine. That's fine. Okay, so it's Bridget rather than Councillor.
Thank you, Bridget.
So jolly good. Sorry, I've just got a funny glitch here with my computer as well. Okay, so I'm not an environmentalist, and so I'm not going to embarrass myself by straying into territory at which I'm not the expert, particularly as we're surrounded today by so many extraordinary experts. So I thought I'll kind of concentrate on giving you the sort of the background of the Ark and the political situation. So I had no awareness of the Ark until nearly 3 years ago, when I went to a Westminster Policy Forum down in London just before Christmas, when the National Infrastructure Committee presented their big vision plan for the Ark. And I actually thought that plan was really good. But there was something missing from it. And the very last speaker on the day was Professor Paul Leinster from Cranfield, who gave a brilliant speech, really saying, where the heck is the environment in the Ark? You know, why is there no reference to it whatsoever in these big and very, big glossy brochures we were presented with? By that stage of the game, half the audience had gone, unfortunately, but his speech was brilliant, and it really, really inspired me to start campaigning as vehemently as I possibly could. Well, I'm getting a message saying start my video. Oh, right, I can see myself, so I presume you can see me now as well. So I started campaigning as vehemently as I could to get the environment front and centre of the Ark, because it has huge opportunities for developing really significant amounts of gain within this very large area. So fortunately, some months later, I became leader of the council, so that just gave me a little bit more influence. So the scale of the development proposed for the Oxford-Cambridge Ark is absolutely formidable. And the biggest challenge is to deliver economic growth while ensuring that the environment is protected and enhanced and every opportunity is gained. So from the outset, I started referring to this as the Green Ark. And at the beginning, there was no environment work stream. There was a productivity work stream, a placemaking work stream, and a transport work stream. So fortunately, other people were saying the same thing as I was. And we finally, about 18 months ago, got agreement to set up an environment work stream. And I've been very pleased to be able to lead on that. And ministers actually seem to be very supportive of this as well. One of the things that pleases me most is that the recent publications from DEFRA now are actually branded the Green Ark. So even though that is only a brand, I feel that the message is getting through. So when I talk about a Green Ark, what do I mean? I mean somewhere with vastly increased areas of green and blue space, where decarbonisation and zero carbon growth is fundamental, where we build houses to the highest energy efficiency standards, which are close to people's work, their schooling, their health, so that actually car ownership is optional. It could be like London, public transport is so good that actually you don't need to own a car. Where we really promote green manufacturing and R&D. Green economy within the Ark seems to be a bit of a no-brainer. So if we're putting photovoltaics on every single house, why would we ship them in from China when actually we could be manufacturing them there as well? And obviously zero carbon transport solutions and water management is obviously a very key issue here and everywhere else. I spoke at a conference recently where I said the only time people want to speak to me about water is when there's either much too little of it or much too much of it. And in this area, we've got much too little of it. And also green energy generation. So, we have a government which stopped us putting wind turbines on land some time ago. And I live in a village which has the only community wind turbine in South Cambridgeshire, which my community really love, and it gives a tithe every year of £10,000 to the village to do green things. So the politics of the Ark is complex. It involves over 40 councils and 4 growth boards, and we have had complicated and fractious meetings for the last 2.5 years because it's quite difficult to get 5 council leaders to agree, never mind over 40 of them. But we now, as of a couple of months ago, have an executive board, and I was really pleased that Mayor James Palmer put me on the board along with himself and Councillor Steve Count, who leads the County Council. So there are 12 of us there. There's 3 elected members representing our end, 3 representing the Oxford end, and 6, well, there were 6 for the middle bit. But a couple of weeks ago, Buckinghamshire Council, which is a new unitary with, interestingly, 196 members on the council, no idea how that works, withdrew from the ARC. Well, they withdrew from the ARC's executive board. They cannot withdraw from the ARC because obviously Buckinghamshire is within the ARC. So it's created a bit of a difficult situation for them, but it just means they're not part of the conversations that are going on about it. So in these difficult conversations over the last months and years, the one bit of common ground has been on the environment. So it's very difficult to get all these different councillors to agree on the amount of growth and so on. But, you know, without exception, everybody agreed that the environment is the most important thing. And there are huge opportunities for us to create an absolute exemplar for green growth, green recovery within the ARC. So the ARC Environment Group, which I've been leading, is a very large partnership board with people like DEFRA and the RSPB really playing a leading roles and doing some truly fantastic work. Recently, we've reviewed the England's Economic Heartland Transport Strategy, which is still out for consultation at the moment, if you haven't had a look at it. And I think we've made a difference to that. I would like to see their zero carbon ambitions brought forward to 2045 from 2050, and hopefully we'll achieve that. We've championed some really exciting behavioural insights work that's coming out at MHCLG, and I won't try to explain those because I think I'll only make a mess of it, but you know, do keep your eye out for those. Also championing lots of local natural capital work, and the local natural capital plan is actually the key driver for what we're doing, but we're really, you know, we really are pushing the principles of the Green Arc, and most importantly to this conference, doubling nature. So, you know, the doubling nature work that has been done by you is now well on the way to being embedded in the ARC's ambition. And that's, you know, and my thanks to you, because without the help that that has given me to promote something that is really, has potential to be really tangible, I found it very, very supportive in the work I've been doing. But I absolutely take on board the comments of Dame Fiona, saying, doubling nature is fantastic, but actually, is it enough? And I think I need to take that away and I need to look at that again. So currently, less than 8% of the land in the ARC can be described as well managed and primarily for nature. Of that, 6.2% is designated sites or undesignated ancient woodland. But not all that priority habitat can be considered to be well managed for nature at the present. So, you know, doubling nature actually only brings it up to 16%, which, you know, is that enough? And I think the answer is probably not. So I'm cribbing a bit from the last presentation I had from the RSPB here. So the ambition is to double the area priority habitat, guided by the local nature recovery strategy, which has identified priority areas for habitat creation and restoration, and to ensure that existing and newly created habitat is subject to positive ecological management. And so if we assume that the ARC has 1 million hectares of land in it, that would equate to creating 80,000 hectares of new priority habitat and well-managed land for nature. You know, that currently there's this very low baseline. The level of economic ambition for the ARC by the government, and we're talking about number 10 here. Number 10 is very, very interesting. The ARC is huge, so it's a, you know, it's a prestigious project, and the intention to make the ARC a world-leading example of green growth, I am reassured, you know, is in the government's mind as well. So doubling the area of green space, doubling urban tree cover, doubling the area of farmland management, which again I was very pleased to hear Dame Fiona reference, farmland being well managed for nature. Now, when the NIC report came out, the ARC seemed to be all about a whopping great expressway with 6 lines of cars, a great big railway, which will be carrying freight as well as people, probably more freight than people nowadays. And they talked about 1 million houses. Where the million houses came from, none of us know. You know, million new houses, million houses on top of the 700,000 or so that are existing in local plans, but that's fallen away. But we have to be realistic that there will be housing growth. The ARC is about economic growth, and now post-COVID is going to be about economic recovery as well. So housing has to go somewhere, and housing pays for the infrastructure. So we've had an announcement the East West Rail is going to come into Cambridge. We're still waiting details on the final route of that. But the budget back in February announced 4 development corporations in our patch. One new Cambridge settlement, a new settlement at Camborne, one just over the border in Huntingdonshire, and one just over the border in Bedfordshire. And we're talking to government at the moment about what that actually means. The old style of DevCo really meant that government came in and did it to you. I am really optimistic that we will have a new style of development corporation. Sorry about the awful shortened forms. A new style of development corporations where I, as the local political representation, and you as the people with the knowledge and our parish councils and so on who will be impacted on this, have a much stronger voice to determine what these developments should look like, how they should progress, how they help to shape them, to make sure that there are positives, many positives rather than just negatives. So I'm not watching the time, so I'm going to hope that somebody will chip in and tell me if I'm going on too long. So the last board meeting we had, as I've explained, Buckinghamshire pulled out, but their growth board will still remain, and it's the 4 growth boards, one of which is in Cambridge. Ours is called the business board, the Cambridge and Peterborough Business Board. The other 3 are considered both growth boards. They've obviously all done local industrial strategies, which will come together to form the growth strategy for the ARC. We looked at the draft prospectus for the ARC, and this is a very important document which I would encourage you all to look at when it comes out for consultation. Now, a prospectus is a vision, it's not about writing policy. The representative from MHCLG, Emran Mian, said that he felt that the environment came out very strongly in the draft document that was presented to us. I thought it had disappeared, quite honestly, and made the point very, very strongly. Emran felt that it represented the government's ambition and said that the document was written primarily for the government. But I know that you will read this document, and it's got to shout out the environment. And the fact that anything environmental isn't mentioned until page 6 is just not on. It's got to be from page 1, and we've got to give people like you and my residents and the residents of all of Cambridgeshire absolute confidence that the environment is a driver here, every bit as much as the economy is a driver. So they're going to take that back, and they're hopefully going to beef it up quite considerably. As I said, our understanding is that number 10 are very committed to the ARC. There are huge opportunities there, but obviously COVID's going to hit it all quite badly, but we've got emerging sectors. We've got lots of sectors of excellence there, which are going to need supporting in order to maintain the growth. And I gather the British Business Bank is talking about funds. So the next most... Yeah, right, I'll wind up in 30 seconds. So the most important next step is the comprehensive spending review. So that will be the announcements in the comprehensive spending review will really determine what the next steps are for the ARC. So we will get a clear indication about what money is coming forward, and that will allow us to then turn these priorities into actual actions and reality. So I'm sorry, that was a bit of a gallop, but I hope it's given you a bit of understanding about how important the ARC is to all of us. It's not something we can ignore. It's something that we've got to see ourselves being part of. And thank you again for the doubling nature vision, which has been a huge help to me. Thank you.
Bridget, if I may, thank you so much for that. And it is so important for us to understand. And I think I've shared with you before my kind of dismay about the way the ARC has been communicated. And the first thing that anyone knew was million homes. Well, you know, as somebody who lives here, that doesn't resonate. A million homes just sounds very threatening. Whereas actually, if we talked about this huge, almost new national park that could run through the centre of the Midlands, which in itself is a very denuded area for access to nature. I've seen a lot of questions coming through on the chat about making sure people have access to nature. This is the really important thing. And somebody earlier talked about white blobs on the map. You know, if you look at places, particularly out in Fenland, where you think, well, that's out in the countryside, they must be able to access nature. Not at all. You know, there's so little opportunity for people to walk, to enjoy. And I think we need to make sure that as the plans for the growth in the ARC come forward, we are absolutely resolute in this agenda about the environment, about nature. And it comes down to quality of life, doesn't it? That seems
Exactly.
as simple as that.
Absolutely. So actually CPRE wrote a letter to our last board meeting really lamenting the really poor communications about the ARC. And I think, you know, to be fair, the problem has been that there hasn't been a whole lot to communicate. You know, a lot of us have had to be doing an awful lot of talking in order to find out what our common ground is. But there's going to be a really robust communications policy, a programme now. So hopefully that will improve.
Thank you. But thank you for the context, and thank you for helping us to drive that agenda forward and making doubling nature. By the way, I agree with everybody. Doubling nature isn't enough, but I kind of like, you know, step by step. Let's double it in the next 10 years, and then we can go from there. Thank you so much, Bridget. That's really kind of you. Appreciate your time, and we do appreciate your continued support for Natural Cambridgeshire. If I may, then I'm going to turn to Adrian Cannard from the Combined Authority. Adrian, you don't have a Wikipedia page that I can sort of look at and get your biography and extol your career so far, so you need to sort that out for next time. But Adrian has been at the Combined Authority for certainly the best part of 2 or 3 years, I would think. And again, is one of those people who has been incredibly helpful to Natural Cambridgeshire in terms of just helping us pull together the doubling nature ambition, also to engage with the Combined Authority and the politicians. But Adrian, you're going to talk to us about what I think is one of the most exciting things we've got on the table, ideas around investment funds and progress with that. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Richard, and hello, everyone. The challenge has been laid down there, and hopefully I can bring a real positive spin to what we can do about it. And I'm watching the chat with concerns about access and how we get at least doubling, I think, is as we've discussed. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how we can drive more investment into natural projects in our area. And I think the first thing to say is we've talked about the relatively low levels of managed natural areas in Cambridgeshire. But I wouldn't want to forget that actually we have some amazing projects, and we have both landowners, farmers, and conservation bodies working really hard on existing projects. But how can we do more? How can we get more investment into the area? So what we did, using some funding very kindly provided through the ARC from their local natural capital team, we engaged Chris Bowden as a consultant to go out and basically find out what people were doing elsewhere and what was the best approach to driving more investment into projects. So he's completed his work, and he's talked to many other areas who've been at this for a number of years to try and find the best way forward. And as you might expect, rather challengingly, there is no standard approach. People do different things according to their area, and they've tried different things. But I think that's great for us because we know what's worked and perhaps what hasn't worked so well. And I want to go through just some of those key criteria for success of getting more investment into an area. And I think the first point to make is this isn't just one source. So it isn't just the public sector putting grants into things. It's not the public donating to conservation agencies, and it's not just individual farmers and landowners taking their own action to improve how they farm in a nature sensitive way. It's all of that and more, and I think we need to think very widely in terms of what we mean by investment in nature. And we've heard from Bridget the scale of growth and the ambition for the ARC, and we've got the ongoing challenges as we move from the current subsidised system from Europe to what we'll have post-Brexit in terms of the environmental land management. So there's a whole range of moving parts out there, and we've seen a growth in everyone's acknowledgement of how important nature is. And we've seen a growth in consumers demanding more, both from their products, but also from the companies that they get their items from. And so this is going back all the way through the system. So how can we capitalise on that? So we've been looking at an investment fund approach where we have a hybrid model. And so there's a role for both business-led investment, where it's seeking a return, maybe not the highest of margins, but balancing those nature gains with still making a return on investment, right through to philanthropic investment where people want to put something back into our system. So that was a key message coming from others, that we needed to consider a hybrid approach. The other message was very much about having a good evidence base, and I think we're making strides on that in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough in terms of building that, but also strong metrics. So if people are going to put something in, then they want to be sure that they're going to see the benefits. And we also need to demonstrate that if people invest, that they are achieving the aims that we all want. We also need to understand why people want to invest. So I've touched on some of the drivers there. We've all been horrified by the recent programs highlighting the climate change implications, and COVID's really brought home how much people do value nature and access to nature. So we can see strong demands there, but also we have in the commercial sector shareholders looking to make sure their businesses play the right part, and also in the agricultural sector, where we are needing to cope with climate change, but also maybe look to new opportunities for income, and that can include farming or changing land to be much more beneficial to nature. So I think we need to take a very broad encompassing view of what we can do. The other message that came through was looking at scale, and Fiona talked about think big and small, and I think that came through strongly in what people were doing. They had pilot projects at a very local scale, but I think any investment approach does need to have sufficient scale to attract the larger amounts and to bundle together both the aspirations of our area and also those who might want to be seeing significant change. And the suggestion was to look at something like a county area. So Cambridgeshire was a good unit for running that in balancing the ability to have a real grasp on what was happening locally, but also a larger perspective. And we've got the local recovery network approach to make sure that we're not ending up with pockets of improvements here and there, but it's all part of a functioning system. It was also about very strongly embedding that in our governance and our thinking. So a strong partnership, strong leadership, and embedding it, as we've heard, in not just planning system, but also our other policies and programs, not just within local government, but across.
1 minute, Adrian.
So I'm now going to say what we're doing about it next, which is we have a workshop coming up, sadly delayed because of COVID, but we're meeting with farmers, landowners, capital investors, and those running projects to really get under the skin of what an appropriate fund would work for them, and that's coming up in October. But what I would say to everyone today is there's a clear call here. How can we drive more investment into nature by bringing what we're doing together? And I think we can see some great synergies and improvements if we do that. And I really encourage people to engage with us as we work through that and find the best way of developing this investment strategy and approach.
Adrian, thanks so much, and bang on time. Well done. Thank you for that. This is a really important piece of our work. We can have lots and lots of aspirations, but we're going to need to find funds to do them. And clearly, even planting the 10 trees a year for 10 years needs to find funding. So this idea of creating an aggregate investment fund, it would be a multi-million-pound fund. But why not? In the scale of what's being described for the Ark, having several tens of millions of pounds for environmental projects across Cambridge and Peterborough seems to me absolutely and not at all out of the question. So we need to develop a framework, and that's what this workshop is doing in October. Do email us if you would like to attend that. And then we will be looking to sort of think about how we actually launch that fund, get it off the ground. Very big opportunity. It's now 5 to 11, and as you know, thank you again, Adrian, by the way, thank you. And as you know, we've got a question and answer session here. We've had lots of questions coming in through the Q&A. We've got about a quarter of an hour on this. What I'm just going to do is just prep some of the people I'm going to be asking to answer questions. So I don't know whether Councillor Haling, you can stand by because I've got some questions on local plans. I don't know whether Councillor Nitto from Cambridgeshire, we've got some questions around the county farms and how they could be used. And I'll be coming to you if that's okay, just to sort of touch on that. But in the first instance, we've had a lot of questions and I'm aggregating them, so forgive me if your particular question isn't here, around access to nature and how people can enjoy nature, questions around parks, around footpaths, and also a little bit of pushback about let's not get too rural. How do we make sure that the urban communities can enjoy nature? And I'm absolutely passionate about that myself. If this is just a rural agenda, we've missed the point. Nature is there for everybody wherever they live. And probably our biggest challenges is making sure nature and green open space is available for people in the city community. So I was going to ask if I can see him, Ollie Burke, if you wouldn't mind having a little go at replying to that. And I might also ask Matthew Bradbury, also from Neam Park Trust, to stand by if he's got anything to add to that, because Matthew is the chairman of the National Parks Alliance and may have things to say on that. So Ollie, put you on the hot spot there. Is that okay?
Oh, that's quite right. Yeah, as long as you can hear me.
Thank you. Yeah, do you want to just talk us through and just sort of perhaps answer that big picture point, access to nature? Yeah,
so I think certainly in my involvement in landscape scale conservation work, whether that's been at the Wildlife Trust or in my current role with the local nature partnership and also Neam Park Trust, access remains to be a big feature of all the considerations in that work. And there's some particular work going on at the moment. For those of you who don't know, Cambridgeshire is part of a national initiative which is funded through lottery and also support from National Trust, called the Future Parks programme. It's looking at future sustainability of parks and public open space. There's 8 projects across the country which have been chosen initially to do this, although the government is looking at how this might potentially be rolled out further and using it as a template for further work. We're the only Future Parks programme working at a county scale, and access is a key feature of what we're looking at through that work. We're working with some consultants at the moment, John Sheaf Associates, and also through the I'm trying to forget the name of the other one. I'll come back to me in a minute. Anyway, the main point is that we're working with them to actually map the green space assets that we have across Cambridgeshire and look at how current access provision is to these spaces and how it can be improved in the future, but also new spaces coming forward. And we're also looking at a microcosm of that within the John Clare Countryside project at the moment. So access is a key theme within that, and really spinning out from some of the work that was done in the neighbouring county in Northamptonshire, where the nature improvement area there had access as a key theme. And we had a number of consultants working with us on that particular project, actually mapping the current access infrastructure, looking at where sensitivities were in terms of overuse, but also sensitivity in terms of biodiversity, to then start to map improvements to access for communities for the future.
Well, thank you, Ollie, for that. That's very helpful. I don't know whether Matthew, you wanted to add anything to that in terms of the bigger picture from across the country. Hi, Matthew. Matthew is the Chief Executive of Green Park Trust.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. Yes, yeah, I'll just add briefly, really, from a national perspective. So, yeah, in my role as chair of the Parks Alliance, which is an organisation which brings together many of the leadership people in parks, public open spaces, both across local authorities and within the public and private sectors, and particularly NGOs as well. There are two main initiatives happening at the moment. One is in response to the green recovery in relation to the changes really of use of public open spaces that have happened through COVID, and focusing on the differences that's made to the way that we're behaving in relation to our public open spaces, and then building upon that moving forward, making sure there is good quality access and good quality public open space being prioritised as a non-statutory service across the country. So I think that's particularly difficult. That it's now being championed by Landscape Institute. So Parks Alliance and Landscape Institute now working in partnership together with the Parks Management Forum as well. So there's a lot of national push going on, if you like. The other thing is, of course, that there are many organisations, including the Parks Alliance and Landscape Institute, who are pushing for this £1 billion for nature and public access to public open spaces, and I would seriously suggest that both as a local nature partnership, but also as a county, we get behind that. It's being pushed very hard by National Trust this week, I think, who really put their shoulder into it too. But I've had quite a lot of experience of it from the Landscape Institute perspective, and it is definitely finding traction with the Parks Action Group, which is part of the MHCLG programme of pushing parks forward as well. So I think there is a national focus. I think there is a greater understanding that doubling nature is incredibly important, and also that access to nature is incredibly important at a local level.
Thank you, Matthew. That's very helpful, and certainly it's very much on our agenda as a nature partnership. And I think the whole point about footpaths and bridle ways is crucial as well.
And also, just one point to just make, Richard, around standards of management as well, is obviously a key concern, because although you may have good access to open space, that open space may not be particularly well managed or looked after. So certainly that's something we're considering as well.
Very important. Thank you both. I'm going to change the focus a little bit. We've had a question in here, which I'm going to refer, I think, to Councillor Pippa Halings, although Councillor Smith may also wish to come in, around the Greater Cambridge Shared Planning Service, which is called for sites, I think, has been published today. The question is, how do we balance the huge challenges of doubling nature with the need for development and housing, and how do we make sure we get that right? Bridget, is that something you want to answer, or is Pippa going to answer?
I'd let Pippa do this one, because she's very, very good on these things.
There you go, Pippa, you're on.
Hello, thank you, Bridget, for that opportunity. But I don't think we have got one of the greatest challenges, I think, here. And as Dame Fiona Reynolds said, you know, we are in this area of huge economic growth, you know, some of the fastest in the whole of the country. So as we look at planning, we really do need to look at how we balance both that growth, the need for housing, and the need to meet our zero carbon and our nature targets. And I'd like to say, there was another question which asked about whether doubling nature should be adopted into local slogan and be adopted, why it was important for the combined authority to adopt it. South Cambridgeshire District Council has adopted it, and we are now including that in the preparation of the next local plan. Now, a call for sites happens as part of the statutory process for that new local plan coming up. And the challenge that we're facing is made blindingly obvious by that call for sites, where there has been unprecedented demonstration of interest of converting land, current arable land, or land, to land for economic and housing development. Now, at the moment, that's just a wish list, but it is a huge wish list. And so the task now within planning is to say, so we know that. But what we did for the first time ever, and it's the only process in the whole country that has done it, is for the first time we included in our consultation process a call for green sites. For everyone to say, apart from putting up sites for housing and economic development, where are the sites that that people would like, farmers, landowners, communities, charities, would like to put forward to see that they can be the pieces that will be the connecting pieces to ensure that the fragments left of the biodiversity and habitat that we have can be connected, and even larger areas as well. And some people put in the chats about we need those smaller areas as well as these large scale areas, and access for everybody locally to something. Lovely. And that call for green sites was critical in that as well. But you know, what we are doing now is saying within the planning system, currently, even though we're doing the new one, currently the local plans we have are not sufficient to be able to enable us to get to that doubling nature. So what we are doing as well is looking at updating the Greater Cambridge Biodiversity Supplementary Planning document, because the existing policies that we have, the existing Biodiversity Supplementary Planning document, are not up to date, even with the 25-year environment plan and the planning framework, which is about biodiversity net gain and environmental net gain. So we have to get those teeth into our current policy while we're facing that challenge of the new. I hope that's helpful as sort of a broad ambit there, Richard.
It is. Thank you very much, Pippa, for that. And I recognise there's an awful lot to talk about in each of these questions, and we're just simply not going to have the time. But I think, you know, getting that balance right is crucial, and the fact there's almost a call for sites for green space, really important too. I would note as well, a number of people have commented about the point that yes, we want access to nature, but we also need sites where nature is protected, because access can sometimes be detrimental to nature. That's why we need so much of it, so that we can spread the load. You know, if you've only got a few pockets, then you can't make that balance work. So
can I just say, yes, Richard, just to add, so part of this amazing, I mean, there's sort of the body of evidence that's been commissioned by planners now is again unprecedented, and this is around water availability. For the first time, a serious commissioning, because I know there's lots of questions there about water.
Thank
you.
Say,
you know, what can be there, and also on biodiversity and on access and on landscape. Last week, there were a series of workshops that some people here on this webinar took part in, where they're looking at the layering of all of the evidence that's being brought together to say, you know, how do we do this at landscape level and at local level? That body of evidence will be published in October, and then there will be a whole series then of looking at how you interpret all those layers between October and November. So once again, I do encourage everyone to keep being involved in this and look at that body of evidence and champion that.
Thank you so much. We're due for the sort of short break between 11:10 and 11:15. I'm going to forego my break and keep asking questions for 6 minutes. So Lord Smith will be on at 15:15. If any of you want to go and have your break, come back. Given that I can't see you, I don't really know anyway, so do duck out, make yourself comfortable. But I did want to bring in another sort of question, if I might, which was, I hope it's okay to ask Councillor Lena Nierko about. It's really about county council, and it actually controls a lot of land in terms of the I think they're called county farms. And one of the questions has been, are councils looking at their own land holdings in terms of what can be done to mitigate climate change and to help double nature? I don't know whether that was something you were able to address, Councillor?
Yeah, of course, Richard. Yeah, thank you so much. It's really exciting to be here with you and that this is taking place. I think if I just may put this into perspective, last year the County Council did its declaration of climate and environment emergency, and we approved a strategy and an action plan. And we have like very ambitious plans to reduce the carbon footprint of the council, and also you know, to help communities adapt to the change that is already happening. And in order to do this, we kind of devised three working streams. So the first one is mitigation. So it's kind of our efforts to try and reduce or prevent emissions, for example, the transition to renewable energy. Then we have adaptation, which are actions that help cope with the effects of climate change, for example, afforestation or changes in land use. And finally, we have natural capital, which are the elements of the natural environment that provide us benefits like fresh water, soils, and minerals. And just focusing, I mean, we have kind of a plan to reach to 2050, but if I just focus on the action plan, and this is available online, and it was up for consultation last year, but more work, you know, it's reviewed constantly. But for our farm state and on other land assets, we have been very clear that we want that land to deliver environment and biodiversity net gain. So we want to double land for nature by 2030. We are also thinking or proposed to plant new woodlands on the county council land. So this is kind of being investigated and the plan being developed. The third one is that all our council services will scope their natural capital assets to deliver environmental and biodiversity net gain. And finally, we want to ensure that all wildlife sites, like our local nature reserve, county wildlife sites, and all of that, are in a positive conservation management. So, you know, that they're going to be surveyed and managed and completed by 2030. So we have a clear timeline and very ambitious projects for our land. So we're very aware of this and working, yeah, towards it. But if people want to know more about it, you know, all the information is online about our strategy and the action plan.
Thank you so much, Councillor. That's really helpful. And as I say, there's plenty of information, and it's an ongoing process. I want to just answer one more question now, and I'm going to ask Martin Baker from the Wildlife Trust to answer it in 2 minutes, Martin. But before I do, lots of questions about water are coming through. I'm not going to ignore those. I'm going to bring those forward to the second Q&A session, and we'll have a chat about that. There's no two ways about it. Vital issue, and one that we're very conscious of. But Martin, I just wondered if you wouldn't mind just answering a couple of questions we've had about what do we mean by doubling nature? How are we going to measure that? Is it about individual species, number of species? What's the answer, please? How are we thinking of measuring the doubling nature ambition, please?
That is a $64,000 question, I think. There's a variety of ways. Actually, we're proposing to have a workshop over the coming months to actually try and bottom out some of the more detailed aspects. But it's going to be a mixture of both area of priority habitats that one of the speakers described earlier. It's going to be around quality. It's going to be around populations of species, and particularly those that are recorded regularly and widespread. And there's already recording schemes for obviously birds and butterflies and some of the more common groups. In some ways, the biodiversity bit is though difficult, the easiest bit. How do we measure sort of quality and the sort of the green space? And there's been a lot of, I saw chat there about let's not forget the urban green spaces. Often it's much harder to sort of really come up with strong measures of wildlife within the urban spaces. So I think it's going to have to, sometimes we're just going to have to choose proxies. So it may have to be things around areas of green space and accessibility of green space to people. Quality, perhaps for some things like green spaces, is going to come down to user perception. Actually, how do people feel about their green spaces? Do they like them? Do they feel comfortable? Can they hear birdsong? So there's a wide range of different options, and I don't have the answer right now. I don't think any of us individually do, but there are some measures we can take forward. The simple area ones that can be measured, whether priority habitat or green space and distance from people's homes.
Thank you.
But the quality is more difficult.
Thank you, Martin. Just very helpful, and just gives us a bit of a flavour of that. So thank you for everybody who's been asked the questions. There are lots of questions out there, and what we will do is we'll aggregate those and answer as many as we can on the website after the event. So if we don't get to a specific question because we run out of time, it's not because we're ignoring you. All of these questions help us to manage our agenda. But I hope that those of you who needed one have taken the opportunity to have a break, because it's my great pleasure now to introduce our next speaker, Lord Chris Smith. You do have a Wikipedia page, Lord Smith, and I could go on for at least 15 minutes just reading through it. You come absolutely qualified to address us beyond peer. Former chairman of the Environment Agency, cabinet minister, also president of the Ramblers Association, which I think is quite pertinent to some of those questions, and perhaps the one that struck me, the first MP to climb all the Scottish Munros. I did not know that. Congratulations. It's a great pleasure to have you with us today, and we really look forward to hearing from you and your thoughts on this agenda. You are, of course, locally connected because you're a Master of Pembroke College as well. So thank you for your time. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much indeed, Richard. And it's, I have to say, a huge pleasure to be part of this very important and very rich discussion that we're having this morning. I remember when I first became chair of the Environment Agency, this is now 12 years ago, a friend sent me a good luck card, and on the front was a cartoon of God sitting on his throne with an angel leaning in at his right shoulder, and at his feet was the globe, clearly under huge strain and distress, with steam coming out of it and cracks appearing, and he was looking down with great concern at the globe, and the angel at his shoulder was saying, "Have you tried switching it off and turning it back on again?" And that was a very good reminder of the real crisis that we are now facing about the condition of the world that we inhabit. And as Fiona pointed out compellingly, during the COVID pandemic, we have come to learn about the value of our closeness to nature even more than we ever did before. The importance of our relationship with the natural world around us has been intensified by the experience that we've gone through over these past 6 months. I always felt, both as an MP and then when I became chair of the Environment Agency, that if you talk to most ordinary people about the environment or the climate or the future of the planet in general terms, very often their eyes tend to glaze over. The moment you start talking with them about their own bit of the environment about the wood at the end of their street, about the stream that runs through the edge of their village, about the fields that they walk in when they go out for a walk. If you talk to them about their own bit of the environment, they get really passionate and really excited. And one of the things we all need to find a way of doing is enabling people to make a link in their own minds between their own attachment to the environment that they experience every day and the broader issues that we have all been talking about so interestingly here this morning. The climate emergency that we face is, of course, very real. And it is already beginning to have real impacts on all of us. And you don't just need to look at what's happening in California or Oregon or the center of Australia to know that our climate is changing, and that what the climate scientists have been telling us for years is happening, that we will have more extremes of weather, there will be more droughts, there will be more floods. It's happening here in Cambridgeshire, and as quite a number of people have said on the chat, the chalk streams of Cambridgeshire are so important to our ecological well-being, are in danger all the time. We live in the driest part of the country. East Anglia has less rainfall than Egypt, if you average it over the course of a year. We also have the most intensive pressures for development of any part of the country, and ensuring that the people who live in Cambridgeshire can have access to the water that they need, whilst at the same time we do not deplete the precious resources of groundwater in the aquifers and protect those precious chalk streams. This is one of the most important things that we have to do over the course of the coming years. I think there are two fundamental lessons that we need to learn about the links between investing in nature and the broader climate emergency that we are all faced with. The first lesson is that investing time and effort and resource in nature helps us both to prevent and to counter the effects of climate change. Very obviously, planting trees helps enormously. Trees absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. It takes time for it to bring real benefit, but planting trees is something we can all think about doing. Protecting peatlands helps to lock in carbon. I remember when I was at the Environment Agency being told that the peatland cover of the Peak District in England contains more carbon than all the forests of Britain and France put together. So making sure that we protect the carbon sinks that we have is also important. Looking after our wetlands and allowing rivers to find their natural course, and bringing beavers back to build woody dams high up in a catchment. All of this helps to combat flooding further downstream, and is a major way in which we can help to mitigate against the impacts of climate change. When we value our natural capital, we begin bit by bit to undo some of the damage that we are doing to our atmosphere and consequently to our planet. So the first lesson is that nature can help in practical ways in combating this climate emergency that we face. But the second lesson, I think, and it's born out from that closeness to nature and the sense that people need nature that we began to learn during the pandemic. The second lesson is that investing in nature helps to change the way we think. And that, crucially, helps to change what we do. I remember someone saying to me years ago, they said, take an organisation like the RSPB. I used to remind all my political colleagues when I was a politician that the RSPB had more members and more active, engaged members than all of the political parties of Britain put together. The RSPB do something that's very profound and very effective. They say to people, take a bird, take a dipper. You're interested in what happens to that dipper. If you need to understand about the dipper, you need to understand about the quality of water in the rivers. You need then to understand about the runoff from agricultural land, from road building into those rivers. You then need to understand about the planning system that determines what happens to the landscape around us. And if you want to understand about that, you need to understand about local government, about county government. You need to understand about the parameters that national government put in place. And if you want to understand about that, you need to understand about all the forces that operate on national government, the lobbying from industry and developers, the lobbying from environmental organizations. And if you want to understand about that, you need to understand about the international treaties to which national governments are signed up. And before you know where you are, you've taken people from a concern for a tiny little bird into a broader understanding of all the political and environmental forces that shape what happens to that tiny little bird. Now that process of linking the very local with the global forces that will shape our environment, that process is a crucial part of developing people's understanding of what is happening to nature and to the world we live in. Doubling nature here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough will help us all to realise that. The realisation that we all have to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. Learning to value nature will help us to value the future of the world as a whole. It's a vitally important lesson, and the work that Natural Cambridgeshire is doing and will be doing is an absolutely crucial part of that. Good luck, and thank you.
Lord Smith, Chris, thank you so much. It's really powerful to hear you with all your experience echo our agenda. And I love the example of the dipper and kind of how just understanding that one bird cascades through everything. And I don't know whether this was deliberate and our event organisers at PEC have set that up brilliantly and briefed you, but it just leads so naturally on to the next speaker, Susie Lucas from Bainton and Ashford Parish Council, where this is exactly what we're trying to do and why we haven't just confined ourselves today to launching 5 big landscapes that might take years and years and years to come to fruition. We are also, I keep going back to it, about those 10 trees a year, or that one patch of your garden that you pollinate and you put the wildflowers on. one thing that resonates with me so much is that people are interested in their locality. That's what they really care about. So there's a community aspect to all of it. And thank you for bringing that to the forefront of our thinking. Thank you for your time today. It's much appreciated. Which I think does Carly, who's appeared to my right, but I don't know where she is on everybody else's screen. She's gone to my left now. I don't know how that happened. It does naturally, doesn't it, Carly, take us to our next speaker, who you're going to introduce, and we're going to do it slightly differently in the form of a conversation. Thank you, Carly. Thank you, Susie.
Thank you, Richard. So yeah, delighted to introduce Susie. Susie is from Bayton and Ashton Parish, and she's going to talk to us a bit about the work she's doing. So rather than Susie doing a presentation, we thought we'd do it in the form of some questions. I'll be asking a few questions, and Susie will be able to tell us all about the great work that she's been doing. So could you start by telling us a bit more about your parish, Susie?
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you. We are a very small organisation, a very small parish, but all of my fellow councillors and myself and residents are really enthusiastic about the opportunities to work with particularly the John Clare Partnership project. We're a parish that's at the northwest of Peterborough. We are part of Greater Peterborough, and that extends out to within the Burley Park, nearly into Stamford. The parish extends from the Welland Valley and the Maxi Cut in the north, from Ufford to Marham to the south, bounded by Barnet, King Street and Helpston, and the Roman Road of King Street to the east. We cover an area of about 3.5 miles north and south, and 1.5 miles east and west, which is about 2,800 acres. It includes 2 settlements of 127 dwellings and 300 people, so we are very, very small. But if I tell you that within that 300 people, we have 50 residents already who have volunteered to be part of the project and other initiatives that we have in our villages, and that includes families and children as well, of an all-age range. The settlements, Baynton is the largest settlement of 100 dwellings, and along the spine of the Stamford to Helpston Road. And the hamlet of Ashton is much smaller, with only 27 dwellings. In fact, I think we have more horses than people in Ashton. Ashton is clustered to one side of the single track Baynton Green Road and Highfield Road. And there are a few hundred yards of Baynton Green Road which separate the 2 settlements, and that's left to green verges, open fields. But even where there are dwellings, we don't have any pavements. This open structure in Ashton very much contributes to the Peterborough area best landscape northwest of Peterborough, which has provided a basis for us for resisting recently some building applications to have more very large homes built, which were not deemed to be appropriate for our landscape and the social provision that we have. There's some commercial agriculture near both settlements, including egg production, 5 stables, but most adjacent fields are left as meadows and permanent pasture and are used to contain horses and a few sheep. The Highfield Road verges and some Ashton Meadows are designated as county wildlife sites. A substantial proportion of both settlements consist of local limestone dwellings constructed before the 20th century, including a 13th century village church with a very flora-rich churchyard. And there's a grade 1 listed base, the medieval village cross, the Butter Cross, next to the church, and a grade 2 listed 16th century manor house. We're very fortunate that lots of local historians and enthusiasts and our residents, we know a great deal about our history of the area and how it was farmed and developed over the centuries, even including Bronze Age crop markings. And for its size, Baynton Ashton has a healthy amount of organised social activity. The parish council is small. There's only 5 councillors and an annual income of £9,000. So we very much seek opportunities to work with others and apply for any funding that is available. And we try very much to punch above our weight. So working together, working partnership is key to what we do. So I think we're quite pleased about the amount of things we do manage to get done. A couple of examples of things we're quite proud of and we think will support our community are that we're part of other North West Peterborough parishes developing the Good Neighbour volunteer scheme, which supported Peterborough City Council to support people in their own homes. And we're part of the Think Community strategy that Peterborough City Council is developing. And we're very fortunate that Peterborough also recognises the importance of parish councils working with the City Council, and they're very supportive of what we do. We also, which has led us into the projects and the things I'm going to talk about, we organised the Bainton Ashton in Bloom last year for the first time. And it was part of the community fund from the City Council to encourage communities to come together. So we had a community event planting trees, shrubs and bulbs around the village. We weren't sure how this would work, but we had 50 residents and children coming together. They met, we had tea and cakes and all came together, and it worked really, really well, and it was all very positive. We don't have a pub, school or a shop, but we do hold pub nights in our villages. Because I think from what we're hearing and everything that we firmly believe, and I firmly believe, it's not just about having a strategy, it's about the community commitment and development to take it forward and to actively engage people in what we're doing.
That's one of the things I wanted to ask. So I think it sounds like you have such an active community.
Yeah.
So I wanted to find out why you got involved with nature recovery plans and what kinds of things you've already done and that you've done so far.
Yeah, well, we were very lucky at the start to have a public presentation at the beginning of the year from Richard on behalf of the Langdyke Trust. And he explained to us that the Trust had launched the John Clare Countryside Project and that it covered our parish. And all of us were very stimulated, inspired by his clear and engaging vision. And what was really good was that he set out a recovery plan that would not only support our appreciation of the environment around us, but help us to find practical ways to enhance the health and diversity of the environment. And it was really good in that it was practical, what we could do. We often get speakers, but it isn't always clear what can we do as a parish and as a villages to actually implement the ideas and take it forward. But we were very clear about how we could participate and what we needed to do, and also what support would be available. And we were also very aware that it might only be a local initiative, and as I said, we are very small, but we will very much recognise we'll be contributing to the global imperative to save our planet in a practical way. It's very easy to think it's too difficult, it's too hard, and what difference can we make? And we very much wanted to spell out the practical ways we could do that. So we wanted to support community engagement, not only across our parish, but also with the wider diverse communities of Peterborough. We've all seen more and more people coming out to our villages, particularly in the recent times. And it's so important for the health and well-being of children, families in Peterborough, that they have access to our countryside. And we very much want to make sure our community, we build a resilient community while creating those opportunities, because we are so fortunate to live here. And the project gives us opportunities to get expert advice working with participating organisations, because I, for one, was very conscious of my lack of knowledge. I've learned a lot more actually very, very, very quickly, but we have access to people and contacts and networks to give us advice and support. And also to be part of bigger grant funding bids that on our own might be challenging to put in. And we also want to work with the other parishes. We have already established those links along the Northwest parishes, but we want to continue to work with them, and everybody has very different ideas. And of course, hugely, we want to leave a legacy of our efforts for generations to come. You know, we really want to leave something. It's an exciting opportunity to do that for future generations.
Is that the main thing that you're looking to achieve from this? What kinds of things would you like to see change as a result?
Well, we very much want to improve our local environment, but people's involvement in it, and that's everything that we can do individually and collectively in our villages. So the COVID-19 restrictions and the cancellation of village events has obviously slowed down our efforts to build community involvement, but it is a challenge, but we are moving forward, and I'll just share how we're doing that. We have developed our own nature recovery plan with 4 key residents engaged in leading and delivering it, ably led by one of our parish councillors, Cliff Stanton. And we have these other 50 volunteer residents who have already committed to be part of it and helping with planting in the autumn. Some of our key strategic objectives are that we need to develop procedures to collect and share information about how we can help nature to flourish in our parish. We want to play our part in halting the habitat loss and the species reduction across the UK by drawing on the experience and expertise on all of our residents. And I think showing how everybody brings something, how they can contribute and get involved. Our phase one, the autumn 2020 to summer 2021, is this gathering and sharing of information. So we're preparing a very detailed parish map, including a survey of habitats with additional detailed notes. We're planning to gather information about our local flora and fauna, including local sightings over the whole landscape, and to record of the decline of local species. We've already been aware that we've found orchids in places we didn't realise, and wild strawberries, and we're discovering things as we go along, much more than we ever thought when you actually stop and look in detail. We're sharing information through our parish news, community websites and newsletters. We've developed the community website very much so that we can share this information. We want to have devise and publish walks around the parish footpaths, focusing on the local ecosystems, heritage sites such as our wash dyke, which is a medieval sheep wash. And we want to improve our signage, giving information about our heritage and the environment that is there. In the summer of 2021, we'll hold a parish festival. We were hoping to have an Open Villages event this year to look at the outcome of all our planting last year, but that of course had to be cancelled. But this year, next year with the parish festival, we'll have exhibitions of local landscape and history, details and talks about local walks and nature reserves, and a photography display, children's activities and a whole range of events. And subsequently, we will appraise the success of what we've done so far. I think we need to keep reviewing and engaging and taking it forward with our residents. Some immediate action happening now is that as a real priority and as a public demonstration of how we can produce change, we're setting up a roadside bird action programme for Bainton and Ashton, with vegetation clearing and management regimes that encourage summer flowering of wildflowers and spring flowers of bulbs, and the planting of wildflowers. We have set out a detailed foot by square foot review of all the relevant areas around the villages. An effective action will depend on us liaising between Peterborough, Peterborough City Council, the Langdyke Trust, the John Clare Project, of course, and the Highways Department, but also very importantly, discussions and agreement with private householders, farmers and landowners, some of whom carry out mowing and hedge trimming. And some of it is, you know, we are a little alarmed at some of it, the extent of it. Of course, some people like everything to be totally pristine and neat and nothing grows, you know, and the hedges are trimmed, and even the wrong time of year like now, so we lose our berries. But again, we need to work with people, and hopefully they will understand the aspiration that we have.
That's great. What piece of advice would you give to other parishes that were looking to get involved, or other areas that were looking to get involved in something like this?
What we very much want to do is, I think, is all the ideas that we have and to raise the awareness in our parish. But I think we'd very much say just do it. In our experience, residents do want to get involved and feel involved. But you have to be specific, and you have to knock on doors and specifically ask and be very clear what it is that you want to do. So as well as the big picture, our plan, and even despite what is going on, we are planning another planting event in October with people, we hope, in their social bubbles, where we will display the plans, and we hope we can safely, if we can, organise people beginning to engage with the plans. But I think you can never underestimate the small steps you have to take and the personal contact to get people involved and all working together. But we very much think that it's the way that you can everyone identify your local priorities, and each of our villages are doing that. What is important to them? What would they like to see? What have people always wanted, whether it's a pond or a community orchard that becomes a social focus? But our passion is that we believe the need is urgent. We believe that even small interventions on the pressure on natural environments will produce dramatic effects. And it's easy to think we're too small, but I think together we can make that difference and support each other and take those steps.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Susie. I think it's really inspiring to hear what you've done, and as you say, it's not easy sometimes, and there's a lot of work involved in doing that preparation and getting things ready, and I think what you're doing is an inspiration to others. So,
well, we're fortunate we have a great community that, and I think more and more things people are involved in, the easier it gets.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Richard, can I hand back to you?
Lovely, thank you, and thank you, Susie, for that. I think it's just what we want to demonstrate there, that Susie and her parish are working within the landscape that we call the John Clare countryside landscape, which is one of the 5 that we've identified as a priority for nature recovery. And there's a lot of stuff going on at the top level and thinking about strategies and working with farmers. But it's so important not to just sort of sit there and fiddle around with project plans and strategies, but to let the local people, as Susie's demonstrating, come up with their own plans and then get on with delivering them. And that really goes back to, I think, the point that Lord Smith said, that if we can get people involved in the dippers or the local oak tree or whatever it is, then their understanding of the contribution they're making to this vision to double nature, or indeed more than double nature. Absolutely. So thank you, Susie, and Carly, thanks for hosting that. I'm going to come on now to our next speaker before our final Q&A session. Then we'll have some closing remarks from myself and Councillor Anna Bailey. And our next speaker is Stephen Briggs. Stephen is a Cambridgeshire-based farmer, farms land south of Peterborough, sort of in that sort of Whittlesea, Yaxley, Peterborough area, and has developed a number of programmes around a concept called agroforestry, which we thought it'd be really useful to hear about. As I mentioned earlier on, farmers and landowners generally are crucial to the delivery of the doubling nature vision. And there are many of them on this call who are doing wonderful things for nature. And I'm sure we could have a whole programme of talks about that, and perhaps we should next time. But today we thought we'd hear from Stephen and his experience of helping farm for nature, but also farm commercially. Stephen, over to you perhaps. Thank you.
Richard, thanks very much. Hope everyone can hear me. I'm actually going to break with convention a bit, as well as being the last speaker in the lineup, and I'm going to share a few photos and slides, because I think, you know, it's all very well hearing about the farm, but I think seeing conveys a lot more about some of the stuff we've been doing. So hopefully I can get the technology to work, and you can actually see things in front of you, which I hope you can do. Let's just see if I can get that to work. So I farm, as Richard said, just on the edge of Cambridgeshire. Can people see that okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, I can anyway.
So the technology works. I farm just on the edge of Peterborough in northwest Cambridgeshire. I'm actually a county council tenant, so I can probably contribute to some of that discussion around the use of county council farms, which maybe I'll contribute to later on. An aerial shot of where we farm gives you the impression that actually it's quite a big open landscape. And bear in mind that 72% of our landscape is farmland. So if we want to make a positive contribution to improving biodiversity, we've really got to include farmland, because it's an important part of the landscape. In Cambridgeshire, we're obviously trying to think about balancing food production and how that contributes to the economy and employment, to landscape, to recreation, and also trying to keep, increase and maintain biodiversity. So there's some big asks there. We have our own type of landscape here on our farm just outside Peterborough. It's a fairly open, flat landscape, reclaimed land from sort of bogland in the 1600s, and been farmed quite intensively for quite a number of years. But it does have its own beauty, and there is lots of biodiversity here. But we've been looking to see how we can improve that biodiversity. Our drivers for our farming business over the last 20 years have been to have more of a multifunctional land use, to increase the diversity of cropping and enterprises, and importantly, improve soil quality. We're hearing a lot more about soil, and as a trained soil scientist, I wanted to make sure that our soil is in a good place, because biodiversity flows from that good quality and good healthy soil. As some of you can see here, it frightened the living daylights out of me a few years ago to see what some of you will locally know as a fen blow, and seeing our most precious resource being degraded. And I wanted to do something about that, as well as producing food and increasing biodiversity. There's a recognition, as we've heard also from Chris Smith earlier on, that trees are important for climate change. They're the lungs of our planet. I was asking the question, could they have a role within agriculture? So I've developed what is currently the largest area of agroforestry in the UK. And agroforestry is a mixture of trees and crops, or trees and livestock, to get significant ecological or economic interactions, and hopefully there'll be positive interactions for both nature and for productivity. And bear in mind that most of our farming systems are monocultural systems, and nature doesn't do monoculture because it's really risky from a productivity point of view and a resource point of view, but it's really risky in terms of a climate change perspective. So thinking about how we can build that diversity into farming systems to make them adapt to climate change, increasingly important. So in 2009, just over 10 years ago, we developed an agroforestry system based on planting 85 trees per hectare across the landscape, 4,500 trees on 52 hectares. The trees went in as very young plants to really change the landscape. Get the community involved, get the children involved, get part of the curriculum. I was hoping that these would all turn into teenagers and they'd be useful to help us pick fruit and manage the trees, but there's not a very good Wi-Fi connection out in the field, so maybe they're not quite so interested. All the trees have been planted with rich pollinating strips around the trees to benefit biodiversity, and just a few pictures of what the farm landscape looks like now compared to big open fields. So we've created lots of localized buffers for insects, pollinators, birds, wildlife, etc., as well as being a productive farm. We're producing crops. We're actually been farming the farm organically certified for over a decade, and so there's no pesticides, no fertilizers. It's profitable, it's productive, and it's actually producing great homes for biodiversity, as I'll share in a minute. We're still using farm scale machinery, so there isn't a hindrance to using large scale modern machinery, and as you can see from this aerial photograph, actually it does change the landscape somewhat in terms of what we're used to. But we all have short memories, because before we farmed this as agriculture, the landscape was covered in water and in trees. It was only us that cleared those trees in the 1600s to make way for agriculture. So we're getting multiple crops out of the same field. We're getting fruit, we're getting cereals. Frankly, all we need is a splash of milk and a knob of butter, and we've got apple pie all in one field. And what's not to like about that? We've gone one step further. We've opened a farm shop and a cafe, because actually, as was raised earlier on, access to farmland is hugely important, or managed access. So we've tried to make those connections by allowing the public and customers to come onto the farm, buy produce that's locally produced from local farmers and ourselves, and have access to farmland in a managed way, because that improves the connectivity and it improves the well-being from both ends. We also make a lot of space for insects. 10% of our farm is put over to scruffy areas or pollinating areas for bees, insects, birds, etc. We've done a lot of baseline research, teaming up with universities and colleges to do that work over the last decade, doing baseline work to look at the impact of the agroforestry. We've teamed up with the RSPB and been monitoring bird populations, and we've got some quite important bird species present on the farm, which we're happy to see. I mean, barn owl populations have gone up for 400% on the farm in the last few years, which is testament to what we're doing. And in terms of biodiversity in the system, lots of sort of wider research showing that actually mixing these perennial trees with annual crops or plants improves things like birds, plant, fungi, insects, getting some of the more beneficials and less of the more damaging insects and fauna, which is what we're wanting to embrace. And recent publications in 2019-20 scientific peer-reviewed papers, our own farm included in that, showed that we're actually delivering 200% more solitary bees and hoverflies, 240% more bumblebees, 10 times higher species richness across the farm. So it's actually delivering what we want. The pink circle is actually one of our farm amongst others, and you can see here at Whitehall Farm, in terms of biodiversity and pollinators, we are doubling with agroforestry. We're doubling the amount of pollinators and the level of biodiversity as measured by PhD students. So it's possible, and we can deliver on these challenges. And with climate change biting, just some figures I did with the Woodland Trust in terms of, again, tree planting and protecting peatland. We need 2 billion trees, or 2,000 stems per hectare across the landscape, and 30,000 new hectares of woodland to meet our Paris Accord commitments. In 2018, we needed 13,000 hectares in the UK. 85% of that was in Scotland. 1,400 hectares in England. So could do better would be the report card. With 72% of the farmland being agricultural, 72% of our land area being agricultural, if we're going to plant trees, they've got to go onto farmed areas. If we put farmland with 5.8% of land converted into some form of tree canopy cover like agroforestry, we would meet our net zero emissions target. Here on our own farm, we're at 8%, so we're nearly double that target. So for us, it's been a bit of a breakthrough approach in terms of looking at how we farm, making the farming system deliver on biodiversity, but also being more resilient to a climate change world. Many farmers could think about sort of trying to adapt 20% of their farms to these types of systems to meet that 5.8% target, to meet our net zero emissions target. Trees are interesting things. They'll grow in most places. Agroforestry is one of the few options with the potential to sort of reduce greenhouse gas emissions, increase biodiversity, help protect natural resources, and at the same time continue to produce food and operate profitable businesses, which is important. And often the thing that stands in people's way is just the way they think about things, not necessarily what they're actually doing on the ground. So I don't know how I stopped sharing, Chris. Richard, sorry. How do you stop sharing?
You should have a shop. Yeah, I think you should have a stop sharing button somewhere. Let me see if I can.
There we go. There it is. Yeah, there we go. So hopefully I'm within time. That's good.
Brilliant. And the good news is, Stephen, that you're getting lots and lots of comments on the Q&A, all of which are brilliant, how inspiring, etc., etc. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions from that list to you in a second. And as I said before, I do think what we probably need to do is start working with you and some of the other people on this call. We've got the Shropshire family, we've got Stuart McIntyre, we've got the representatives from Wild East, all of whom are, showing the way on this agenda. Perhaps one of the actions we need to think about is how can we gather together that peer group and then bring more and more people along this route with you. I think that would be a tremendous way forward. I wondered if you could perhaps answer one of the questions. Is, are there any barriers to the greater take-up of agroforestry? What's stopping it being adopted?
There are and continue to be some barriers. I mean, land ownership is an issue. If you're a tenant farmer like myself, then actually, trees are a long-term project, and if you don't have long-term tenure of land, that's a real barrier. And secondly, government policy to date has really separated trees as a forestry activity and agriculture as an agricultural activity, and you weren't allowed to mix the two. That is changing, and government are really waking up to the potential of sort of more mixed multifunctional land systems, and are seeking ways to embed agroforestry in the new domestic agricultural policy, and also the ELMS environmental land management scheme.
Thank you. I was also just going to ask what we've got one of our members of our board, Tim Breakmeyer, on the call. Whether Tim, in a minute, I could perhaps come to you and you could talk more generally about farming and nature and how we can bring up that all together. Can I also just sort of, by way of warning, ask one or two of our other panel, James and Martin, I'd perhaps like to just talk a little bit about the water question that's been raised by many people, if that's okay. Whilst I do that, and I'm going to come to Tim next if that's after this question. Stephen, anything? Are you looking at any peatland restoration at all as part of your work? That's a question I've been asked.
Yeah, well, so I actually sit on DEFRA's National Peatland Strategy Task Force. So I'm very keen to see ways that we can manage peat soils in a way that still provide a productive resource for food, but also reduce the degradation or the loss of peat. I mean, frankly, we will only reverse the trend of peat loss if we stop farming it. We can slow that down, and we can put measures in place to try and minimize the degradation, as we're doing here. But to reverse it completely would mean a shift away from agriculture completely in the fens, which, you know, I think is a difficult call if people still want to eat.
Indeed, and getting that balance right.
Richard, if I may, I'll make one parting comment, and that is, as a Cambridgeshire County Council tenant, and it was raised earlier on, you know, 13,200 hectares of land in the local authority, the second largest landowner in East Anglia after the MOD. I think there is a massive unrealised opportunity for the county farms to link better with food, biodiversity, education, health, recreation, etc. They've got a massive resource of people like myself that are farming on one hand, and consumers on the other, and the two are completely disconnected. I think
Lovely.
It's a huge opportunity.
Well, we've got county councillors listening, and we've also got councillors from Peterborough City Council, which also holds land. So let's keep that conversation moving, if we may. And I just wanted to introduce Tim Breakmeyer and just ask Tim, any thoughts on what you've heard from Stephen, or more generally on the whole sort of farming and nature and the balance that needs to be created?
I think I'd start by saying, in the 6 years I was involved in a thing called the Country Landowners Association, I don't think I ever saw anything as inspiring as what Stephen's just shown us, of what really is possible. And I was the first person to admit I had a very jaundiced view about agroforestry, but that was truly inspiring. There's no doubt about it that I think that farmers can, want to, and will be a part of this nature recovery in the future. And one of the overriding things that's going to drive that is the need to respond to climate change, not only for their own benefit from a point of view of growing crops, etc., but also from the point of view of the benefit of the environment. And so I think there's a very good shoehorn in there for landowners, albeit whilst I think Stephen was enlightened, I think many farmers will need to be taken on this journey, and don't think that it's going to be an automatic conversion, because for many Cambridgeshire farmers who farm the larder of Great Britain, the idea of automatically doubling the amount of their land in nature is going to terrify some of them and not be popular. But I think farmers are up for it, and I think there's a journey to take them on. And I think that will start with the new public benefit scheme called ELMS, providing it's properly designed, simple and inclusive to all. And the thing that will encourage, and they are looking to make sure that that's the case, is that we need to provide the recovery on a landscape scale. Whether it be a river catchment with 25 farmers producing 40,000 hectares of the same recipe, so that we address some of the things that Lord Smith told us about, whether it be natural flood management or calibrating of old-fashioned rivers. So I think there is huge potential there for farmers to be involved. And I think there is the very big need to make sure that the private investment sits alongside that public funding, because the public funding itself will not be enough to encourage farmers to change their habits, because many of them will see environmental farming as not as profitable as a crop of wheat. And we need to make sure that that is not the case. And we've heard quite a lot this morning about access to the countryside. And there's no doubt about it that COVID, and certainly on my own farm, I've seen a massive increase in the public wanting to use the farm. That is a tricky journey equally to be taking landowners on. I think landowners have got to wise up to the fact that permissive access should be a good thing for the future. It needs to be carefully documented so that they don't fall into the trap of finding they've allowed a long-term public access scheme. But equally, I think there is a role of education required so that the public themselves and the communities understand what nature needs, and that's probably not too many domestic cats and dogs off leads and rubbish dumped in the countryside, which is, I'm a regret to say, a problem that will butt up against what we're trying to achieve. So that's just a few, but I think there is huge potential there for the future.
And I think that's just the reality, isn't it, Tim? I mean, this issue about sensible access to the countryside and using it well, partly, of course, it reinforces the need for scale. If we've just got small areas that are accessible and easily reached, then there will be, regrettably, I mean, litter. I mean, let's not start on litter. You know, there will be those consequences. So we need to manage this well. We need to bring people with us, both the farming community and indeed the public, as they access the countryside and the landscapes we're talking about. I've just asked if we could have our panel on video for the final sort of 10-20 minutes of the call, so you can actually see who you've been listening to. So we've gone off radio and we've become TV. How exciting! I just thought it'd be quite nice for the final session. I think what I'd like to do is just take one other topic that has come up a lot in your questions, and that's water. Now, Natural Cambridgeshire is obviously very, very concerned about the provision of clean water and the quantity as well as the quality of water. A lot of the work on this is being done through other forums, so that doesn't mean we don't prioritise it, but there are other forums looking at this. But I did just wonder if I could turn to James Littlewood perhaps, and also Martin, who have perhaps been the closest involved in some of the conversations about chalk streams. James, to start with you, could you offer us just a few thoughts on that and what Cambridge PPF is thinking on that?
Yeah, rather than talking about abstraction, I did just want to mention a water-based solution that is something that we're looking at. One of the issues is sewage discharge into the chalk streams. We are working on our Coton Reserve on the west of Cambridge to put in place a nature-based solution which involves using a series of pools to treat water coming out of the sewage treatment works before it discharges into the river. That would take place on farmland. It would very much more than double the amount of nature on that site. It would also improve the water quality going into the River Cam system, so it's helping the biodiversity of the river, and it would also provide access to nature. So that's just a kind of example of the sorts of things that I think we want to try and achieve through the doubling nature vision. And touching on the earlier point, the only thing that's really stopping that from happening is the funding. And we probably need about £400,000 to £500,000 to deliver that scheme, which would be ready to go next year. So, you know, if we applied that to all the sewage treatment works which are feeding into the chalk streams around Cambridge, that would make a massive difference to the amount of nature around those sewage treatment works, but also improving water quality in the streams as well. And I think I could perhaps leave others maybe to touch on the abstraction issues.
Thank you, James. That's a great project. I looked it up yesterday. Really exciting project, I thought. Martin Baker from the Wildlife Trust. Anything to add on that?
No, not on the. There's lots that can be done along rivers and in floodplains to improve the habitat, but the biggest constraint we have, as rightly noted by some of the questions, is the simple lack of water, and that the water companies do have a responsibility, Environment Agency, but it's the whole of society and government. There's a whole completely lack of joined up thinking in the way that water resources are allocated and planned for. And I'm not going to give a plug for other organisations, but I should mention at least the water companies have come together with Water Resources East to start looking at regional solutions for water supply, because the number of homes talked about in the ARC that Bridget was talking about earlier simply can't be built and won't be sustainable. Otherwise the River Cam and other chalk streams will be dry. They're already dry in places in some summers. So it is a major issue, but it's, whereas we can do things locally on the land, working with landowners, working with communities, the whole water resources issue is something that stems from national policy and the way that water resources are done. That's a much bigger picture that obviously we need to be adding our voice and supporting Cam Valley Forum and the other local groups that are really pushing for fundamental changes. And I think there's a bit of an open door with the water companies that they realise things have got to change, but the legislative regime within which they work is still a barrier. So multifaceted problem. It's the biggest one we've got to tackle collectively.
I think that's absolutely right, Martin, and I'm very conscious of the number of questions we've had on this, and I think just to reassure everybody, it is on our agenda. We do believe that if we double nature, then that will help address these issues. All the conversations I've had recently suggest that people really get it and understand it, the problem, but I'm not sure they've come up with the solution yet, and I think that's what we've got to push hard for, and I think we need to work hard to help Bridget and others so that they can take this into the policy forums and understand it. I've got Tim waving a finger, so I'm going to go back to Tim. Can you unmute Tim for me, Carly? No, he's there. And he's not now. I think we.
Is that better?
That's the one.
I just wanted to add that the Granter, which is one of the Cam catchment tributaries, we are trying our hardest to put in place a catchment approach for probably 30,000 acres, which will cover flood risk management. Hopefully, as a result of that, the recharging of the aquifers, water quality with sewage works, and flowing from all of that, much better biodiversity. And that's being done as a part of the Water Resources East project. And it's in its infancy, but certainly that would be one of our major aims, to actually recharge the aquifers as well.
Thank you, very helpful. I just had a couple of other questions in back to you, Stephen. Some of them are actually asking for a lot of detail on your profit and loss. I'm not going to ask you to go into that. But a broader question, nicely put, how does your productivity compare with conventional farming?
So we are, straightforward answer, we're about 10 to 20% more productive than an equivalent sort of monocultural system when you were combining the tree outputs with the annual crop outputs, and that correlates quite well with quite a lot of research that's been done globally, where the sort of land equivalent ratios, where you're comparing an agroforestry mixed system with a monocultural system, those equivalents are about between 10% better or up to 40% better in some instances, and we're able to do that because we're out actually. We're keeping something growing all year round, and we're harvesting sunlight and building carbon, and actually using more space. I mean, the tree canopy is not competing deliberately with the crop elements. They're in a different area.
Exactly. Thank you for that. Very good. I'm going to bring an end to the Q&A session there. There are other questions, some more detailed, and we will do our best to get back to you on that, although I have to renew my plea to do understand our resource constraints. I have nobody that we can simply hand these questions to and prepare answers for you. It will be, you know, some of us on the call doing that in our spare time, I'm afraid. So bear with us. And, you know, if you'd like to lobby others to resource us more, I'd be delighted if you supported us so we can get on with delivering things more quickly. But what's going to happen now is I'm just going to do, as this is, I think, on the agenda, a call to action, which will be very brief because most of it's already been said. And then I'm delighted that Anna Bailey from East Cambridgeshire will make some closing remarks, but they won't be quite the closing remarks because I will come back just to sort of close everything down and also tell you a little bit about the admin things that can happen after this. So that's really what we've got left in the remaining quarter of an hour. So first of all, from me, in terms of the call to action, this is about action. Last year, we had a very good launch of the Doubling Nature Ambition, and a lot of people quite rightly said, well, how do you do it? This year, I think we're putting some very practical steps in place for how we can drive this forward. To me, it feels as if the policy arena is there. We've got a lot of good drivers for the environmental agenda. There are threats to that. I can't remember who mentioned it, but I'm not sure. I'm particularly enamored of the new planning regime and what's being promised there. And I think we'll have to think very hard about how we make sure that doesn't undermine our ambitions. But in terms of calls for action, there is very much something for everybody in this agenda. I would make a plea to the politicians on the call here to have a think, please, hard about how do we ensure that Doubling Nature is embedded in local plans. So it is actually a statutory consideration, not just a sort of, oh, well, someone thinks it's a good idea. I think the point that's been raised around the farm holding, the land holding, which applies particularly to Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, there's a huge opportunity there, surely, that we can all think hard about. And some of that work's being done, but can it be accelerated? And I think just simply making sure, as politicians, I would urge you, please, to champion this cause. So when you're standing up and saying, look what we're doing in Cambridgeshire, it should be one of those things. And I think that applies across the whole of the county, districts, the combined authority. Let's put this right up there on our agenda of the things that make Cambridgeshire and Peterborough great. It should be. I really hope it can be. And then there's a plea for communities. Let's get on the front foot as communities, and I think that's why we specifically invited Susie, and there are others, many others, many of you on the call, things like the Cam Valley Forum. Communities can take control. I know that the County Council, again, has got a Think Communities programme, and I think Councillor Walsh in Peterborough is on this call. And we need to make sure that Think Communities is as much about the environment as everything else. The toolkit we've produced is being trialled across Peterborough. We've got an enthusiastic response from the vast majority of the rural parishes that we're working with there, just as Susie has explained. So have a look at that toolkit, take it away, and we will be looking to find funding to enable it to be driven further forward faster. But there's community action. It's a huge part of this, and it goes back to the wonderful examples of Lord Smith and Dippers. We can get people interested locally, then the planet can hopefully be saved down that track of events. And it's massively about individuals. This is not an agenda for statutory organisations or MPs and councillors alone. It's about me, it's about you, it's about our friends, and it's about encouraging them all to think about how they take action and to take the pledge that is on the Natural Cambridge website to pledge their support for the Doubling Nature ambition. And if there's one thing I'd urge you all to do today as we close, please go on to that site, naturalcambridgeshire.org.uk. In the news section there, all these documents and the pledge are there. Make the pledge yourself. It does matter because it shows our commitment. Then please encourage your friends, family to do so too. So there is so much that we can all do. I go back to the very start of this meeting when I said, you know, I wasn't prepared to watch David Attenborough, not because he's wrong, but because I have to, and I think we all have to, try and stay focused on what we can achieve. And I think what today has shown through all our wonderful speakers, there is so much we can achieve, there is so much we can do. We have to stay optimistic, but also relentlessly positive in the way that we champion this forward. That would be my call to action, if I may. I hope it isn't too laboured. I'd like now to ask Councillor Anna Bailey, who's the leader of East Cambridgeshire District Council, to make some closing remarks from her perspective. And can I again thank you personally, Anna, for your support and the support of your council for this ambition. I think you were one of the first, if not the first, to actually translate last year's launch into policy. And I remember coming to your council offices wanting to thump the table and ask you to take action, and I saw your corporate plan on the wall and thought, oh, I better cancel the meeting, you've already done it. So over to you, Anna. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much, Richard, and it's been really interesting to hear the positive contributions today. And I think despite the challenges that society and local government face, this really does feel like something very powerful and positive that we can all progress. And I do believe that the will and the mood of our residents is absolutely with us now. And speaking as a leader of a district council, I believe that local authorities, parish, district, county, our combined authority, we all have a very significant role to play. And we absolutely support Natural Cambridgeshire and its aims, and we thank you for arranging today. I noted Dame Fiona Reynolds' words about how we measure progress, and local authorities absolutely love to measure everything going, and we do need to think hard about how we do this in all of our local authorities, and it was discussed in the Q&A session. It would be great if we could adopt a consistent way of doing that across our geography, and perhaps this is something we can seek the support of Natural Cambridgeshire with. In East Cambs, we're incredibly lucky to have in Wick and Fen the country's first ever nature reserve to be stewarded by the National Trust for over 120 years now. And a few miles away from that, we've got over 2/3 of the UK's wintering Buick swans residing on the Ouse Washes. And across Cambridgeshire, we've got other equally important sites. But also on a smaller scale, in the patch that I represent, we have Little Downham Nature Reserve, which is a community-led and loved project of some repute established back in 1995. It's made up of 3 areas, Pinglewood, Miles Meadow and the Holts, and it includes a community orchard, and it's home to very important flora and fauna. And they've now provided themselves information and support to 11 other parish councils in other areas about what they do and how they do it. They're very inspiring. We need to treasure all these sites, large and small. Doubling land for nature isn't necessarily easy. Being the breadbasket of the country and being a national hotspot for housing and employment brings employment growth, brings challenges that on the face of it seem to fight against space for nature, but it does also provide us with opportunities, and it's those opportunities which I do firmly believe we can and must grasp. And what an absolutely inspiring presentation from Stephen Briggs about how to make our fields work harder for nature. And I would love to spread your message across East Cambridgeshire, Stephen. At East Cambs, we've adopted an environment and climate change strategy and action plan, and we've approved £100,000 of funding every year to deliver on our commitments. And a big part of that plan is about increasing space and improving conditions for nature. We're about to start work with Wildlife Trust to look at our own land and assets, small as they are, to improve biodiversity value through, for example, provision of meadows and tree planting. We are already doing this, but we know we can do more. And we've been consulting on a new supplementary planning document on the natural environment, which is due to be adopted by the council in a few days' time. The new document will form an absolute material part of our local plan, seeking net gains for biodiversity when development takes place. And it will help us to secure, through development, both protection of our natural assets as well as creation of new areas for wildlife and nature to thrive. Bird boxes alone do not cut it. We expect genuine net gains. We've invested in development of Ely Country Park with further expansion plans to come, and we're working with the Future Parks Accelerator programme, and we're working with parish councils so local community scale projects can be delivered. And our own house building company, Palace Green Homes, is developing a new sustainability policy, which not least will drive the delivery of our community land trust project at Kennet, which has Garden Village principles at its heart. We've got a site in East Cambridgeshire that's been left to its own devices now for about 4 years. And guess what? Nature's moved in, it's taken over, and in some style. And the council is looking at a sensitive reuse of this site. But in so doing, we're looking to the site's natural assets first. It's those assets that will dictate how the site can be used, and we value those natural assets, and we're currently developing a landscape plan to improve and increase the biodiversity and the ecology and to help nature thrive. So we know this is only the start. We know we can do much more, and we know we can't do it alone, and neither can any individual organisation, which is why the Doubling Nature Partnership is so incredibly important. And I do urge others to get on board and join us. But it's not only about expansion for nature's sake. We've talked a lot today about how it's also about people. And as many have said today, the COVID pandemic has shone a light on the importance of nature and open space to our mental health and our quality of life. And the feeling of well-being we get from being amongst trees, being able to see and get into green space, having access to open water and the first call of the cuckoo, it's absolutely massive. And when I'm tired of Zoom, as I do, I take 15 minutes to just sit in my garden with a cup of tea. And as I sit, I can watch an entire world going about its business. The wrens are pecking at the soil. My tame blackbird that regularly takes a bird bath in the wood chips underneath my yew tree. The bees doing their thing. It's simple pleasures that restore me. They make me feel alive, and it makes me feel happy. Not everyone has a garden, but we can and we must provide more spaces for nature everywhere for everyone to enjoy. We shouldn't just aspire to double land for nature. We must double land for nature. It's not the only measure, but it's a really great start. And East Cambs District Council is fully behind this initiative, and we've been pleased to support Natural Cambridgeshire in a small way financially, which I hope will help you transform yourself into a real delivery body, and I wish you every success with that. So thank you for inviting East Cambs to be part of your plans and for this event today, and let's get to it.
Oh, Anna, thank you. What a great way to finish the conference. And thank you for the financial contribution. It does make a difference. It will make a real difference to our ability to move things forward faster. I really appreciate your support. And can I just add, I've had a few questions. You know, we've only had some of the councils speaking. Well, we can't have all the councils speaking on a conference, otherwise it becomes a council conference. So please don't read anything into it that we haven't had others of the districts on the platform. Have widespread support for our plans, and all of the districts and authorities are on this call at the moment. So don't read anything into the speaker platform. That isn't to denigrate our speakers either. They've been wonderful. I think that's about it really, isn't it? I'm not sure I've got anything more to say apart from a big thank you to everybody involved. I thanked earlier some of the individuals and the organisers of the event. And I think I would encourage you now to go onto the Natural Cambridgeshire website, register your support. And as Anna has just said, let's get to it. You know, let's get on and deliver in very practical ways. Some will strategize, we need that. Some will fundraise, we need that. Some will plant trees, some will farm, some will just spread the word. But if we work together and we work positively together, then we really can make Cambridgeshire and Peterborough an even more wonderful place to live, because that's what's at the heart of all this, with nature really prospering, really thriving, and then all that beauty and joy that we've all talked about will be at the heart of our lives. Sounds good to me. Thanks so much, everybody. Have great days. Have a great time. Thank you.